There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
All right, welcome to a Media Mothership here on Edge Radio in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. On the show, we explore how media can shape our understanding of the world around us. I'm your host, Dr. Craig, PhD, joined by Lord Taylor.
PhD.
You're not. People doubt whether I'm actually a doctor. I bumped into someone from the studio and they said, the doctor thing you put on in front of your name, that's just your stick, right? That's just you. And I go, no, I've done the PhD. Don't I sound like I've done a PhD on the radio? Don't I? I obviously don't. Anyway, I can give you Lord Taylor because you've got that, qualification of the Scottish plot of land, which I love to hear about. So Lord Taylor and MC Dent. We'll give you the MC Dent character today.
I'm happy with that. That works.
Fantastic. Have you got any MCing around the corner? I know you've been busy. Adelaide, was it the last convention you were at?
Yeah, I was at Adelaide in June for AvCon, where I got to interview voice actor Bryce Papenbrook and also Lady Beard, which was incredible.
Lady Beard?
Yeah.
The J-pop music stuff?
J-pop, death metal singing, cutesy idol, cross-dressing, professional wrestler.
Wow. Yeah, I'd completely forgotten about that phenomena, and it's still out there. So we should do some of that in K-pop Unlimited.
Sounds great.
Anyway, but before I forget, by the end of the show, is there anything coming up? Because I know you also do the quiz show occasionally. Anything for people to keep an eye on? I mean,
if anyone wants to see a quiz night, Republic, Wednesday, 7 p.m. every Wednesday. I host a quiz night there. I don't write the questions. That's a pub trivia quiz. In terms of pop culture quizzes, I've sort of retired them just for the time being because they were becoming a chore, and when you're not getting paid for something, you want to make sure that you enjoy it.
Yes.
And you don't treat it like a chore because otherwise there's other things you could do.
Oh, wise words. Wise words. Excellent. Well, the main topic for today's discussion is going to be jumping back into that huge list we were going through from Den of Geek, which was rolling through the top, 20 matches or something. You've got
the top 15.
What reached that?
The top 15 WrestleMania wrestling matches.
There you go. Sorry, yes, that's it. And we're down to the three, right? The top three.
Top four.
Four. Oh, okay, right.
Wow.
I haven't watched that one. All right. So we need to go back. So that's what we're going to be deep diving into, basically an exploration of these. And I've been doing a little bit of homework. So I've watched two of those matches and an abridged version of their number one choice. But I was reading skimming an academic article around this, and they broke down four key parts of wrestling, which are interesting to analyze. One is the blurring of reality and fiction. So these are moments where, obviously professional wrestling can blur that line, right? There are moments in a wrestling match which are real, like someone's really been damaged or hurt. Then there's fiction as well. There's the gimmicks, which is a specific term, right? The idea that the personas is it that the personas are gimmicks themselves?
The personas that they have are called gimmicks. And usually they're somewhat influenced by the people in real life.
So the rivalries they'll have, that they're scripted, but also potentially drawing upon real life animosity between who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most famous instances of this is 1997 had a rivalry between two wrestlers called Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, where they just genuinely did not like each other.
Right.
Bret Hart, because he was a bit more old school, and he saw Shawn Michaels being a huge show-off. and he thought that Michaels was using his political clout to bury him and his friends. And Michaels, at that point, was self-admittedly very angry, very bitter, very, very pilled up. And he was an extremely talented acrobatic wrestler, but had so many personal demons, and he enjoyed throwing his weight around. And one of the really strange parts about this rivalry is that it becomes extremely personal, because by the end of it, their factions, the Hart Foundation for Bret Hart and D-Generation X for Shawn Michaels, their factions near the end were becoming very antagonistic towards each other, but there's sort of the metatextual level where you can tell Bret Hart's getting upset with Shawn Michaels because Shawn Michaels, having also turned heel, he's also playing a bad guy. He's stealing his spot as the main bad guy in the company.
And these phrases, are they the gimmicks as well? Like if you're a heel or a babyface, is that the gimmick they have, the persona? Is that an example of the persona, or is it a much deeper concept there? Because I guess the heel and the babyface the heel is kind of crudely put the villain and the babyface is the hero. But it can be much more complicated than that.
It's more so that a heel is someone you boo and a babyface is someone that you cheer. And Bret Hart, during that year, he really played with the concept of it because he's Canadian. So he was a heel, and he also has a huge fan base in Europe. So he was a heel in the USA. He was explicitly anti-American, but he was still a babyface in Canada and the rest of the world.
And so so there we have this kind of personas, and this leads to the second point this article says, which is audience participation. Because I guess if you understand how the gimmicks are working, part of it is then being able to the audience themselves shaping the narrative. Right? There are moments in in matches, which we'll talk about today, where the fans themselves really have started to direct the storyline in a way. But we'll get around to that. So audience participation, then serialized storytelling. And this is something I did find to be one of those really fun kind of barriers of entry where you're dropped in. If you're it's the wrong way to get into wrestling, obviously, to look at WrestleMania, because as you were saying, it's the culmination of these stories, and this is their payoff. And so I was having to watch YouTube explanations of these matches, which basically then fill in the last 2-3 years worth of backstory leading up to that. But the storytelling is really key, isn't it? That interconnected, to understand these matches, we're unpacking a ton of interconnected storylines. It's
like reading comic books. It's very difficult to know when to jump in. So you basically just have to start and hope that they're going to show some flashbacks, show some older stuff, and incorporate it, because usually they'll incorporate, previously on the shows Raw and SmackDown, which are the two flagship shows. But also, something that they do that's really useful is that they'll also play sort of like a best of package, like a hype package, a video right before a major match, basically giving you all the cliff notes that you need. So you know what's happening, you know what the relationship is between the characters, between the wrestlers when they step into the ring. So it'll bring you up to speed.
And many people, I guess, can compare wrestling to some degree to soapies, to TV soapies that are ongoing and they have this huge ensemble cast and been going for decades, and you need to understand these characters, their histories, and I guess in those cases fans also do some of that heavy lifting with YouTube pieces they create. So that's the third one. The fourth one is cultural and political commentary, that wrestling can serve as a form of cultural political commentary, and that there are ways in which the matches that you watch are also critiques of social and political issues through these performances. Certainly, I found some of the older ones interesting to watch because of then watching commentary tracks of fans later talking about how some of it's dated really badly, particularly the treatment of some of the female wrestlers and the way that commentators were describing those female wrestlers early on. So and in fact, I did see Hulk Hogan weirdly at one of the Trump rallies. Right? So, yeah, there must be this kind of political blurring that some of these... And, of course, Jesse Ventura became a politician as well.
Yeah.
A governor of...
He became, mayor, and then he became governor of Minnesota. And Hulk Hogan, let's use his real name, Terry Bollea, the guy who plays Hulk Hogan, the character,
yes.
Was so jealous about that he attempted to run for president. because he and Hogan and Ventura are they're old rivals from the 1980s. So
What character was Jesse Ventura? Was that his
Jesse
wrestling
Ventura is the wrestler name. I don't know what his real life name is. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yep. So obviously, yes, some politics might bleed into the type of entertainment which is engaged with. All right. So all that and more we'll get into in today's Media Mothership.
James George
Oh,
Janos.
is this Jesse Ventura?
Yeah.
There you go.
And a lot of them will just change their names around. So one wrestler who was extremely popular in WWE in the about 10 years ago and is now one of the main guys in AEW. In WWE, he was called Daniel Bryan, and he goes by his real name now, which is Bryan Danielson. So sometimes they just literally swap their names around, and that's that.
Yeah, right. And I guess The Rock also is now known through his Dwayne Johnson. I'm trying to think in movies if he performs under that name or.
Well, because the The Rock is owned by WWE. The name The Rock is owned. So
really?
he
Copyright
legally
owned, bundled up as a WWE character. Really?
Yeah.
That's why his film credits don't say The Rock.
everyone calls
I
him The
don't
Rock.
know that. For some reason, I don't know that. Right? Really? Because I guess in reviews. Movie reviews for a film that has The Rock in it, they'll refer to him as The Rock, and maybe in brackets Dwayne Johnson, or Dwayne Johnson, and then in brackets The Rock. But they won't put his name The Rock as the credit in the movies because that's a character.
And even then, The Rock it's a nickname for his original in character name, in storyline name, because originally he was introduced as Rocky Maivia, because his dad was Soul Man Rocky Johnson, and his grandfather, his maternal grandfather was High Chief Peter Maivia. So it was combining, because he's a third generation wrestler, so it's combining his dad's first name and his maternal grandfather's surname, Rocky Maivia.
Wow. Yeah. Look, it was interesting in the homework I was doing. There was, I think it was the match, the Bret Hart versus Stone Austin match. Anyway, in the lead up to that, they had The Rock's first bout, I think, as a wrestler, and it was fascinating to see the critique of that, this kind of formative character that would go on to become so key. Yeah, really fascinating. All right, well, let's get going with the list. So the number 4 that we were up to was the Hardy Boys versus the Edge and Christian versus the Dudley Boys. To introduce this, the article talks about it being... Have you seen this match?
Yes, I have.
Okay, right.
So I watched it specifically for this.
Oh, great. So the article talks about it as being these... So this is a 3-tag team match. And it had already been stolen the show with the crazy ladder match the previous year, and SummerSlam then did the rematch, calling it tables, letters, and chair match, which was just the same thing, but with more emphasis on the table spot and a few chairs thrown in. That was an improvement, leading to the 3 teams to give it one more go at what is considered by many to be the all-time best WrestleMania. So these are the 6 men upping the game completely. It was 16 minutes of insanity, with these teams putting themselves through hell, including an iconic shot of Jeff Hardy hanging from the suspended tiles, leaving himself open for the Edge, spearing him into the ladder. To increase the stakes, each party had a helper to do a run-in, with Spike aiding the Dudleys, Lita aiding the Hardys, and Rhino aiding Edge and Christian. They gave it their all to finish the trilogy, and it still holds up as one of the best and most chaotic ladder matches of all time. All right, so what did we just hear there?
What does that mean?
Explain that.
So a ladder match, for anyone who doesn't know, is there's a prize at the very top of the ring. It's being suspended from a cable. Usually it is a belt, and whoever gets it first and unhooks it and returns to the ground while holding it is the winner.
So you've literally got to climb up a ladder, and this is a normal ladder.
Yep.
It's in that kind of A-framed shape.
They have started using trick ladders in more recent years that have inbuilt crumple spots for when they use them as weapons and hit people with them, or when they have, or often something that this really popularized is actually throwing someone onto a ladder that's horizontally suspended just off the ring.
So this is that first point, blurring reality and fiction. So obviously they don't really want to seriously injure people with ladders. So there are crumple points on ladders which are designed to then you can weaponize the ladder, and those crumple points will mean that to an outside person it will look like a real ladder has done a lot of damage, but really it's been designed to crumple in a certain spot so that that person isn't as badly injured.
Yep. So the idea is that it'll crumple so that they can sell the idea that they've been injured.
Yep.
And there are ladders that they can climb, but there are, because they have to climb to get to the top. But there are crumple points built so that they don't actually smash each other around and destroy each other with actual aluminium ladders. Similar to how there are always folding trestle tables that get set up and people get put through those. Those tables are tricked as well. They're designed to crumple in the middle.
Right. How about the chairs that are often used to then whack the wrestlers? Are those chairs also...
Those are real steel chairs.
They're used all the time, though.
And
Ow.
that's actually something that wrestlers have commented on. It's like it's well known that it's fake in the sense that matches are predetermined. They know who's going to win, and they're pulling their punches so they don't actually injure the other person. But the one thing that you can't fake is a steel chair.
Yeah.
So often there are shortcuts. So you might have someone when they're about to get hit with a steel chair, they'll put their hands right up in their face.
Yeah.
And their hands hit to make most of the impact.
Right.
But there are some times where they get smacked in the face with the chair, and it's very real. One of the most infamous instances of that is Mankind versus The Rock at the Royal Rumble in 1999. Mankind gets handcuffed, and he has to get... They agreed upon, I think, 6 chair shots. The Rock was meant to be hitting with 6 shots to get him off stage, but they angled themselves wrong. So The Rock ends up hitting Mankind in the forehead, because he's fully in character as the main heel of the match, the main heel of the company at that point, smacking this other dude over the face with a real steel chair in front of his wife and kids. So that caused some tension between Mick Foley, who played Mankind, and Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, for a very long time.
That'll be tough if your family's watching and you're actually getting... And again, that idea of, everyone knows that wrestling, you're not really seeing the hospitalization after these people. But there are moments where there is some reality. That blurring does happen. So you never quite know when you're watching a wrestling match if that's actually real damage. In this one, the Hardy Boys versus Edge and Christian versus the Dudley Boys, was there any real damage done in this one? Or was it stayed within the fiction?
There was no real damage done as far as I know, which is astounding when you look at the main spot. So again, the main spot, the most famous part of this is Jeff Hardy climbs up a ladder, grabs the belts, and then one of the Dudley Boys kicks the ladder out from underneath him, so he's dangling 18 foot off the ring.
Yeah.
And then Edge climbs most of the way up a ladder and does a full-on spear tackle into Jeff Hardy, who's dangling off a rope 18 feet in the air, and they both come crashing down. And it's just ridiculous. And you go, how do these guys know how to land so well?
And what was the audience participation from watching that?
They were just screaming the entire time. There are some matches that they'll have chants, or they'll have certain things coming in fits and starts, but this was they were just cheering their minds off the entire time, cheering like madmen.
So this also would be a case of these performers very cleverly escalating and knowing how to really pick up the kind of fever pitch that was happening within the audience.
Yeah, exactly. It's because wrestling is not a competition; it's a story, and so matches will have an orientation, a complication, rising action, a climax, and a denouement with falling action. And there are many fake climaxes always, which is usually a kick out where someone will be pinned and the ref will slap their hand down the 1, 2, 3, and they'll kick out at 2 or there'll be outside interference if it's no disqualification, and the other guy will get pulled off at 2. And often the audience will count along with that. But audiences will also just go all in if they're seeing if they're not seeing like characters that they really like, if they're seeing really great athletic ability, then often they'll get hyped up in that as well.
Serialized storytelling, was there anything in the story here that you really engaged with that you thought was also part of why this is such a great WrestleMania match?
I didn't do my homework on this one. I didn't watch any of the Raws or SmackDowns or 4x7. I just watched this match in isolation. And usually, because Raw airs on Monday night, it's it's aired every Monday night, or almost every Monday night since 1993. SmackDown's been on since 1999. And if you watch the Raws and the SmackDowns before you watch a major pay-per-view like WrestleMania, you'll get a lot more out of it. But I didn't. So I had a good time watching it, but I just saw 3 teams of 2 plus their helpers just all beating the snot out of each other.
Anything you found a kind of cultural level that was weird or exciting? The gender, the ages, the...
It is mostly just like I think most of the faces in the anti-heroes are just like beautiful young men, and then you've got the Dudley Boys who are a little bit older, a little bit heavier, and then there's a run from Lita who was working with the Hardy Boys at that point, and when she like goes like yeah and rips her shirt off just so everyone can ogle her, it's like oh okay, fair enough. We're very much also the mesh shirts that the Hardy Boys wear are very sort of you kind of expect to see those guys at a gothic nightclub.
Yes. All right, so now moving on to, and I do have some audio for this one, so we'll set it up with a bit of audio.
Many in the crowd chanting for The Rock. Quite frankly, many in the crowd chanting for Hogan. A mixed reaction here at WrestleMania.
So this is the start of the Rock vs. the Hollywood Hulk Hogan match from WrestleMania 8. This is the number 3 pick on Best WrestleMania Matches. And I guess to read the description of it, from the days going from Rocky Maivia? Maivia. So that was The Rock's initial character name.
Yep.
To the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, The Rock has had a knack for adapting to the crowd's reactions. And this is what I found so great about this match, is that it explains how important crowd reaction is, and where you've got 2 performers that can go off script, I guess, and allow the audience to rewrite in a way what had been planned. So to read further from this, it goes on to say it's what gave us Hollywood Rock and the Final Boss. Great name for The Rock, the Final Boss. Is that his heel name? It was his heel name in the story for WrestleMania 40. Hollywood Rock was his heel name in the build up to WrestleMania 19. Right.
But yeah, for as much as people criticize him for being extremely risk averse in terms of his movies and his products that he shills, The Rock has never ever been scared of getting booed as a performer.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what's great to see in unpacking this match. So it goes on to say that this is the first one-on-one, I guess The Rock and the Hulk Hogan have, and it was able to evolve the match into something truly epic and unforgettable, showing the true magic that can come from reading the room and correctly playing the crowd. So it goes on to explain that Hogan went into the match in his heel New World Order persona, fresh from attempting vehicular manslaughter on The Rock. And I did have to look at the YouTube for that. It's fantastic. So we can talk about that storytelling a little bit. Then it goes on to say that having gone from WWF for so many years and being in front of a passionate Canadian crowd, Hogan received a hero's welcome, which is what we're hearing. And the place gradually realized they were more into Hogan than The Rock. Even if it wasn't a technical masterpiece, and Hogan definitely seemed to have injured his ribs legitimately, the two put on a hell of a show that absolutely should have been the main event. Even the post-match visual of a hurt and humbled Hulk Hogan timidly asking for permission to show respect came off extra special. All right, so let's unpack that. So, blurring reality and fiction. So what's the fiction storytelling, I guess, of this match?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, Hogan's in his Hollywood Hulk Hogan NWO incarnation. So for some context there, Hogan wearing the gold and red was the main face of the WWF.
That's his classic 80s, early 90s persona. And he'd rip the yellow shirt and, I am a real American.
Yeah. With real American is the theme song. What you going to do when the USA runs wild on you.
And it's amazing watching some of that stuff.
Telling all the little Hulkamaniacs, work hard, train hard, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. Definitely not steroids. And basically, he around the time of the steroid trial, around
Right, I didn't realize that.
Around 1993 was when the steroid trial happened. And
So what was that? The wrestling got busted for being on steroids?
more specifically, Vince McMahon got investigated by the feds because they thought he was distributing steroids to wrestlers in the WWF.
Which is illegal?
It's definitely illegal if you're presenting it as an actual sport. So
Right.
before that, kayfabe had been an extremely well guarded secret. Kayfabe is what they call the actual. It's a corruption of the Pig Latin phrase for be fake, which is what they would say. So kayfabe is the fictional world of wrestling.
Right. Like everyone knows it's staged.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that there's a predetermined winner and they've rehearsed it before they're going to do it. And what
Yeah.
we're really watching is,
But-
stunt work.
Prior to the steroid trial, the fact that it was fake was staged was an extremely well guarded secret. There's a brilliant story of Vince McMahon having a chat with Ted DiBiase, who became known as the $1 Million Man, who was this extremely evil, well-moneyed, one of the best heels ever, who would just like torment people and he'd do these awful things. One of the best things he ever did as a heel was telling a kid, if you bounce this basketball 10 times, it'll give you $500. So the kid bounces it 9 times. On the 10th one, Ted DiBiase kicks it away. And he's just so good at and his gimmick, his shtick is that he's just got an obscene amount of money. He's completely loaded. He wanted to be a champion. He couldn't win the belt, so he made his own called the $1 Million Belt. He just bought one.
Right.
And there is a story about Vince McMahon, the head of the WWF, sitting down with Ted DiBiase and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Because you're going to play this character called the $1 Million Man. We're going to pay for private limos to and from the venue for you. The other guys are going to be, driving. We'll fly you around first class. You'll stay in 5-star hotels. We are going to do everything that we can to convince people that you are actually loaded and playing this character in real life. However, in exchange, you are going to be the most hated man in the wrestling business. And Ted DiBiase looked him straight in the eye and said, I am your man. So it was extremely well guarded. And then essentially because McMahon was getting invested by the feds for allegedly distributing steroids, he basically had to go very public and say, okay, it's all staged, it's all predetermined, it isn't real. It's not a competition, it's a story. And Hogan testified against McMahon.
Really? So Hogan said that this was a real sport?
He testified saying that McMahon had told him to quote unquote
to
get on the
take
gear. He
steroids.
basically
I
said that
see.
McMahon had been giving him steroids and encouraging the distribution, basically in exchange for immunity because he was religiously using steroids for all the 1980s and the early 1990s. And so essentially he parted with the WWF on extremely bad terms, and he went to WCW, who was the main competitor at the time.
Because so what happened to McMahon? Did McMahon was he found guilty of steroids?
In the end, I think either they settled out of court or he was found not guilty in terms of. I think it was suggested that wrestlers take them, but
But that was the real change from. I've probably forgotten that there was this sense that wrestling was real, and those that would be saying it's not real as a real debate. All that came to a head during the steroid debate and the fact that McMahon had to say no, it was all.
Yeah.
Because I guess part of his defense there is that it's all fake. So why would I be pushing steroids? Because they don't need the steroids to win. It's not a competitive space in that sense, I guess.
But also, I mean, because there's no real life competition, there's no I guess no one's using it to get ahead because it's all predetermined.
Yeah, right. So as in the Olympics, where the doping of certain countries brings discredit into the sport because it's meant to be a level playing field and no one's meant to be on drugs. If you say, well, actually, it's the playing field is not level because it's fictional.
And it's like we often look at steroids as being a very negative thing, and if you're using them solely to get muscular, they are, but they're also when used as prescribed to actually treat injuries that won't heal otherwise, they're a valuable thing to utilize.
Exactly.
For some reason, I guess I'm in that camp of I've seen so much moral panic around the word steroid that it only has a negative connotation. Yet it was developed for a really important medical reasons.
many different important medical reasons. Corticosteroids are used in everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get steroid cream to put on a rash.
Yeah.
Gosh.
That's
you're
like
right.
that's not gonna lead. It's not gonna lead to an enlarged heart and.
Or biceps.
But anyway, 22-inch killer pythons, brother. But
And this is Hulk Hogan, right?
So
That
yeah,
he
he jumped ship to WCW, which is very different because WWF was all about the big comic book characters. WCW was all this is a real sport. It's proper wrestling, and they just hated him from day one. The audiences just gave him very mixed responses at best. And so at Bash at the Beach in 1996, he basically joins these other guys. He turns heel. He becomes a bad guy for the first time since he's been wrestling in Japan in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And he becomes Hollywood Hulk Hogan, the leader of the New World Order, which is basically the ultimate heel stable in WCW, and he becomes the main villain of the promotion. And suddenly he goes from getting mixed responses from doing this same old stale babyface routine to people suddenly love him as the main bad guy, and they just can't wait to see him get his comeuppance. So the fact that they had him, and the New World Order had disbanded, WCW had folded, McMahon bought its assets, and then he brought in.
So here we have the lead up to this match.
Yeah,
right?
so he brought in...
That collapsed.
He brought in Hogan and the other two original members, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, who'd originally been big members of the WWF in the early 1990s. Those three came back as the original incarnation of the NWO, and they came and they attacked WWF. They were like, we've already fought WCW, now we're going to come and fight the WWF.
And in terms of storytelling, that's great, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's going to revitalize the story world there. It's going to introduce... this reality and fiction blurring, like Hulk Hogan and those guys were really disruptive of the WWF, and there's probably a lot of bad blood. That's real. And the fact that they were antagonistic towards the WWF and it becoming the WWE plays into the story they then perform leading up to WrestleMania.
And just the work that they do in the lead up with Rock and Hogan, where the Hogan's all like, the fans turned their back on me, brother, which is his origin story from the original heel turn in '96.
Yeah.
And the Rock goes, you were part of so many WrestleManias. Do you have one more in you? So it's sort of the implication that the Rock's going to beat Hogan into being a good guy again, and that happens.
Hold on, go back. I mean, because there's a point in this explanation where they talk about Hulk Hogan driving a semi into the Rock's ambulance.
Yeah. Again,
This is just his heel persona.
Yeah.
And again, I guess what's really fascinating about that is leading to this audience participation is that the script, it's meant to play out with Hulk Hogan as the heel, but and I guess that there can be a turn, but that would happen within the wrestling. Whereas what's fascinating when you watch it is that immediately, as soon as Hogan kind of walks into the ring, there's a sense of the crowd behind Hogan, right? That he's not the heel. He's not being booed. He's being cheered.
it's exactly it, because Canada loves Hulk Hogan, and you're absolutely spot on. He'd done all these dastardly things because Hollywood Hulk Hogan is a moustache-twirling villain, and even so, despite him trying to kill The Rock in storyline, Canada doesn't even care. They're like, yeah, Hogan's back at WrestleMania. Woo!
So what they're seeing the nostalgic Hulk Hogan from the 90s, like when he was the babyface of WWF. And it's fascinating to me that then there's moments in the commentary where they refer to, there's this moment where he hulks out or something? He does that kind of shaking of the body and the hands, and he's getting all pumped up.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, a signature move.
Yeah, that's classic. A classic Hogan match is where it starts out reasonably even, or he might be a little bit ahead, and then the heel does something to cheat. The heel gets ahead, everything looks lost, and then Hogan hears everyone cheering for him, rips his shirt off, starts posing, points at the other guy, and goes, "You!"
Right.
And then he does his 3 or 4 moves. He no-sells punches, and everyone was just absolutely stoked to see that happening again.
Yeah, what's fascinating to me, I guess, in the order that I watched it in, is that that's very much about those kind of the setups which the wrestler has, the signature moves, I guess a wrestler has, and that they'll do the signature move, and in the fictional storytelling, that's coding that, okay, this is a kind of final move, this is a kind of defeat of the final boss move. And what's fascinating to me is that while the audience was cheering for Hogan, it does go back to, I guess, the script at the end.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, I guess, hearing about this, that what many people point to as being great about this is that you have two performers that read the room very quickly, and then because I think the description I was hearing was that then Hogan took the lead.
Yeah.
So whereas they'd practiced the match and obviously The Rock was going to be calling the shots, it then switched to Hogan calling the shots, The Rock becoming the heel, and there's that great scene where Hogan takes his belt off and starts whipping The Rock.
Given that The Rock is half African American, it's a bit of an
I
uncomfortable
know,
image.
I know, it's so like, but then what happens is The Rock does the heel move where he pushes the Hulk, Hogan goes down, then he gets the whip, and he really goes at it, right? He's like Hogan, I think, got 3 whips in, and they were really slow and kind of, staged. But The Rock performs with such ferocity on him that, again, it creates that sympathy for Hogan, going, oh, man, the poor guy. Not only has he lost his belt, but he's really getting whipped with it. And, again, all that would be the idea of that audience participation, that they're reading the room, The Rock is feeding off the heel turn, but then by the end... It all becomes... Oh, that's right, yeah, because at the end, the 2 other NWO guys come into the ring. Break that down. What's that storytelling that's happening at that final scene?
So basically, the whole plan was to turn Hogan face again. Yep. That was always going to happen. So essentially, and one of the things about being in the NWO is if you're in the NWO, you're in the NWO for life, brother. So him basically having that face turn in during his match with The Rock. And again, there's that setup of The Rock essentially wanting to... bring Hogan back across like it's Luke and Darth Vader. They feel Hall and Nash feel betrayed, and they're really angry at him. And that was a real hallmark of the NWO and WCW, is that if they ever thought someone was going to lose, they'd always hit the ring and cause a disqualification.
Right.
So it's essentially like sort of the logical extension of that is that they've lost their guys. They just want to beat the snot out of him. So The Rock helps Hogan fight off Hall and Nash, and it makes Rock and Hogan look even more heroic.
And then they do that wonderfully kind of schmaltzy move of getting like the Rock... at the end of the sentence, I guess he puts it as even the post-match visual of a hurt and humbled Hogan timidly asking for permission to show respect came off as extra special, right? That moment where he gets to perform all those moves again and they shake, and I guess that's that passing of the torch vibe or something that's going on between The Rock and the Hulk.
Yeah, and Hogan is a massive backstage politica, and this is the only time he's ever genuinely been happy to pass the torch.
Right.
Because I think he sort of acknowledged, because his place in the company was a bit shaky at the time, because he just, spent X number of years with WCW, I think 7 or 8 years with WCW, trying to put the WWF out of business. So he's sort of like, all right, cool, well, obviously we lost that one. Rock is the top guy at the moment, and he's like, okay, I'm not going to politic, I'm actually going to, properly show respect, as you say, and they have that handshake in the middle of the ring, which is really sweet.
And it was interesting watching it as, I guess, someone that knows those two personas. Of all the matches, this was one that I kind of had a handle on in terms of, okay, I know the Hulk Hogan from growing up in the 80s. I know The Rock from the movies. But it's fascinating to see, again, how defined they are by their wrestling. Like, knowing what the serialized storytelling is, the audience participation there, defining that, the skill of being able to... And I guess what it is... that really I found remarkable was just increasing the fever pitch of the audience, that, recognizing that the audience were looking for a nostalgic Hulk Hogan experience, and then escalating that up and up and up and ramping it up so supremely well. It was
and just that opening shot of Hogan and Rock just sort of standing in the ring, nowhere near each other, just sort of looking around as the audience is going absolutely nuts.
That face off, yeah. And again, it's interesting watching commentary pieces about that, saying, there are moments where they'll read into the semiotics saying, at this point, Hogan looks surprised at how the audience is reacting to his moves or the fact that he's thrown The Rock in this way. It is fun, that kind of improvised theatrics that are occurring in that match. So I mean, for me, that certainly made sense in terms of getting into the background of it.
And that's something else about is that Hogan comes from that era where matches were called in the ring. They didn't
Right,
where they
yes.
matches were not choreographed in the 1980s unless you were Macho Man Randy Savage. So they every time you see wrestlers locking up or putting each other into like a chin lock or a headlock, they're whispering directions to each other.
Yep. Yeah, and that's something I did read about this match, that it was largely called in the ring, right? And as you're saying, all right, that's not something typically done. It's old school. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left.
That's enough time to talk about number 2.
All right, number 2, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. So this match, again, just quickly to put people into context of it, the article says that this is the very concept of WrestleMania that they see this is leading to. So Shawn Michaels rose up the ranks over the years to become a top guy and one of the go-to competitors who would constantly put on a show-stopping performance at the year's PPV. The Undertaker had a strength and endurance buff thanks to his undefeated streak at WrestleMania and the extra mystique that came with it. While the two had a feud a decade earlier, this time it felt almost mythological, and the two proceeded to put on an exhibition that caught up to the hype. It was also done at the perfect time as both men were getting, starting to slow down. So let's unpack what we're hearing in the background here of The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. Because for me, I guess just jumping forward a little bit, for me what fascinated me in contrast to the Hulk Hogan one was that by the end of it, you start seeing all these signature moves of the wrestlers, the tombstone move that The Undertaker's doing, and the chokehold, and then the flying kick that the Shawn Michaels does.
Sweet chin music? Yeah.
And all the commentators are saying, coding that, right? Saying, okay, and that's the final move, and this has got to be out, and he's down and he's counting out, and then he keeps knocking out. And for me, that, reading into it and some commentary around it saying, this was the thing that some commentators have found remarkable about this, is that it was one of these moments at that point in history where rarely is a signature move then disrupted and the match has to continue. That typically signature move, a pin and a kind of counting down to 2, and once you're at 2, you're going to probably win. And they're saying one of the things that's remarkable about this is that this constantly destabilized audience expectations in that way, that those signature moves were not scripting towards an end match. The signature, like it was halfway through, and I think you see these signature moves, and the commentators are saying, okay, I think we're going to call the match here. Because there's that amazing one where the Undertaker flies off the ring in one of his signature moves, but then lands into the cameraman and knocks himself out.
Yeah.
And then they have to, and again, that reality of blurring and fiction, they have to deal with the reality of this is now off script, and so fictionally, how do we give the Undertaker enough time to recover, to come back in, to go back onto script? So unpack what we're hearing there. So what was the reality and fiction of this match?
So one of the realities is that Shawn Michaels at that point, and still today, born again Christian, discovered God in the early 2000s when he was on the shelf with what he thought was a lifelong injury, and he'd never be able to compete again. And literally one day woke up after praying and his pain had gone away. So he comes back. Following in the 90s when he was extremely spoiled, extremely petulant, prone to temper tantrums, on a lot of pills and alcohol, and he's politicking his way and through the business and trying to get people fired. Now he comes back, he's much more humble. Now he's the mentor to all the other younger guys on the roster in real life, and he basically makes it a point to not take any belts. He's like, I'll have a title match with you, and then you're going to win and you go over me. And the born again Christian thing really comes into play because he's basically sexy Jesus in this. It actually the match opens with him descending from the ceiling with a white overcoat and a white hat, sort of like the good counterpart of Undertaker.
Yeah,
He's zombie Western mortician.
Yeah, because he took the costume of the Undertaker and then inverted it into white and then performed. Yeah, I guess yes, Jesus.
Yeah, sexy Jesus, and that's basically the thrust of the match is the Undertaker at this point.
And because the Undertaker is associated with hell and the underground, and the way they introduce him with the flames and rising up, so it's very biblical.
Yeah,
The audience, the audience participation here? They're not necessarily. I mean, they're cheering both at certain times.
This is very much a face versus face,
Right.
because even though
Okay.
Undertaker is very much associated with a lot of sort of satanic imagery, his thing is he's essentially the law, and that's what the guy who plays Undertaker, Mark Calloway, he was basically the most respected guy in the locker room because he'd been there the longest. He was the judge in Wrestlers Court. He fixed disputes. So there's this sort of implication in the character of the Undertaker that he is the law.
Yeah.
So he's basically like lawful neutral, and so everyone loves him. Everyone adores him.
Yeah.
We can very easily assign D&D alignments to wrestling. So the audience loves both of these guys, and they're both incredible performers. Undertaker at this point is the best he's ever been because he was kind of slow and lumbering in the 90s, and he really stepped up his game in the 2000s. So I think it's very much a case of the audience would be happy to see either of them win. They'd be happy to see Michaels defeat Taker and win and end the streak. And in terms of all the guys who could have done it, I think Michaels is one of the dudes who they would have been most happy.
And it's just saying this is scripted, and it does come as a surprise to me because it feels going on the commentators during the match. It's like, okay, well, this is the end of the streak, right? There really seems that it's a deserved win against the Undertaker, but yeah, the end of it is, I guess, scripted for the Undertaker to finally triumph after kind of being unable to do it so many times. But I guess, the audience, the satisfaction there for the audience would be that both wrestlers come out very well at the end of this. What do you feel makes this match a remarkable one? To be up there in the top three.
Honestly, for me, I just always remember one of Michaels' kickouts. There's this zoom in on Taker, and he looks absolutely beside himself. He's meant to be this 6.5 foot tall Western mortician zombie who's been the head of a cult. He's done everything. I think this is his 16th WrestleMania, where he's at that point still undefeated, and he just looks utterly bewildered and terrified, going as if he's wondering if Michaels is also this supernatural force. Obviously, in real life, Mark Calloway is not a supernatural force. The character of The Undertaker is. But I think it's just a case of these two guys who just really, they're putting absolutely everything they have into it, and they're really... And the idea that any one of those moves could be the last one, but it just keeps on going. It builds up so much anticipation.
Yeah, look, and the energy you hear in the audience is amazing as it gets to these final, kind of potential countdowns. And then, there's the scene you were mentioning, the kind of the close-up on the... And again, the camera operators would have to know these beats potentially, or there'd be so many camera operators around the ring, I guess, that one of them's always going to potentially capture a face.
I think it's the latter.
Yeah.
I got to say, though, my favorite Michael, because they had a rematch the following year where Shawn Michaels in real life basically wanted to retire from wrestling because someone pointed out that his son was 9, he was halfway gone, and he was like, I don't want to be on the road and traveling when my son leaves home. So he was like, I'm going to retire while I'm ahead and spend time with my family. And there's this brilliant moment where he basically wages his career against Taker. So it was billed as the career.
Oh, right.
It was
if
billed
I
as,
lose, I'm out and I'll leave. Or something if I win, right.
It was
right.
he had to wager his career to get a rematch to try and end the streak a second time.
Right.
So and the very end, because these guys respected each other. They're really good friends in real life. And this is a brilliant moment near the end where it's very clear Michaels can't win. He's completely splattered on the ground. He really can't. He can't go any longer. And Taker is, out of respect, yelling at him to stay down. And Michaels just sort of pulls himself up, and he claws himself up, and he drags himself up, so he's face to face with Taker. And Taker's signature taunt that he's just done on the video that we're watching is a throat slit with the thumb. Michaels does that in Taker's face, doesn't do anything, so he just smacks him across the face. And Taker just loses it and grabs him, puts him in a tombstone pile driver, jumps so far in the air. And that's what it takes to put Michaels down for the count. But these guys just work so well together.
Look, and the thing that makes it remarkable and is worth watching if you can on YouTube is the scene where The Undertaker launches himself out of the ring onto the cameraman. Because I think what Shawn Michaels had kind of pushed one of the cameramen, and I was reading online about what had happened in this moment, because allegedly what was meant to happen was the cameraman was meant to kind of catch and absorb the Undertaker, But instead, the timing was out, and instead the Undertaker hit the camera, and you hear this really noticeable something breaks, and then he's out. He's actually knocked out, and they do this whole kind of theatrics and pantomime because the ref has been thrown out of the ring, and Shawn Michaels gets the ref back into the ring, and they're debating and arguing over something, and it's just enough time to the Undertaker to somehow get back into the ring, and then it plays out for another 10 minutes or something of their exhaustion. So yeah, it's very much quite an amazing physical match.
And this is one of those cases where this should have been the last match on the show because there was a title match afterwards that absolutely no one cared about because they screamed the house down,
really
cheering for these two guys who've both been wrestling for so long at this point because this is WrestleMania 25 and they've both been there since they've both been singles performers since the early 90s. Shawn Michaels was a tag team champ in the 80s, so people really love these guys. They have a lot of nostalgia wrapped up in them, and this one is just there's really nothing negative to say about it. It's just two guys who respect each other, two guys who are on the top of their game, and two guys who the audience absolutely adores.
Yeah. Well, Marcus, we haven't gotten through the list yet. We've still got the final match, which we'll have to bring you back.
Honestly, I could talk about the final match for a whole hour, so that works.
Okay, done. But thanks very much, MC Dent, for coming on. And this has been a deep dive into 2 WrestleMania matches. I'll put show links to that Den of Geek article for you to have a look at. And some links to the YouTube, at least of the Undertaker vs. Shawn Michaels is fully up on YouTube. If you want to watch WWE, there's bits and pieces on YouTube. There's also, is it Binge has it? Or?
Binge has literally every recorded WWE thing ever, as well as all of WCW, all of ECW, and all of Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Smoky Mountain. We might explore that in the future. So yes, keep listening to Edge Radio. We have K-Pop Unlimited coming up next. Lord Taylor, what's on K-Pop Unlimited?
Good music.
Good. I did find one K-pop reference for this week that we might
talk about that. Yeah.
link to Wolverine versus Deadpool versus Wolverine.
Yeah.
Is it verse? How are they
I
phrasing
think it is,
it? So that's been Media Mothership for another week. Thanks very much for listening, and potentially watching us on the stream. This time the YouTube stream seemed to work.
Seems to.
I seem to obscure everything with the mic stands, though.
I honestly think it adds to the ambience. It's like the fact that you've got these big old mic stands in front of people. I think it makes it feel more like a radio station. Because it is a radio station.
We blur those lines though, between fiction and reality. Many people would doubt that it's...
Maybe we're trying to fake a radio station. I don't know.
All right. We'll now find the music to play next. Increasingly professional. Thanks again for listening. Thanks, guys, for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
See you next week.
Ciao.